Morning, everyone. We're going to wait just another minute as attendees are added onto the webcast, and then we will get started. All right, it looks like attendees are coming on a little bit slower, but my number is not moving up. I think we can wait one more minute for additional people to jump on. All right, let's get going. Looks like there's not many people jumping on now. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So everyone is aware, this webcast is being recorded. This is a public work group to talk about clean transportation equity project safeguards for cap and trade auction revenue uncertainty. My name is Sam Greger. I'm with the California Air Resources Board. I'm one of the managers who oversees clean transportation equity projects as part of the funding plan for clean transportation incentives. We anticipate that materials for today's work group are available on our low carbon transportation investments webpage, and the link is also available in the Zoom. I believe it's going to be posted in the Zoom in just a second. Please note that this includes the agenda for today's meeting, which is also on the screen in case you want to follow along with the discussion. Today's discussion will be focused on staff's proposal for implementing fiscal year 2021-2022 clean transportation equity project safeguards for cap and trade auction revenue uncertainty. To be clear, these specific equity categories were already approved for funding by our board in November in the funding plan for clean transportation incentives. This work group is to specifically address the potential that cap and trade auction revenues are less than anticipated in the budget, and we would have less funding than what was included in that funding plan. And today's meeting discusses staff's proposal if that were to happen. Today's proposal is not about shifting funds between equity project allocations that were already approved, and it's more procedural versus the work groups that are focused more on policy and programmatic proposals. Also, the governor's proposed budget that came out in early January is for this next fiscal year, 2022-2023. The budget and this year's upcoming funding plan is not going to be part of today's discussion, but we will provide the next steps at the end of this meeting and go into more detail as to when this year's process will be kicked off and what to expect. So, as you know, we are utilizing Zoom today and their raised hand feature to facilitate questions and comments during today's discussion. The Q&A period will be after Ashley provides an overview of the safeguard proposal for the projects. For those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom navigation bar, Participants tab. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raise hand option in the More tab. For those who want to raise their hand who are participating by phone, please be sure to press 2 and we will call on you. And once your line is open, you can begin to speak. Also, if there are any Zoom disruptions for any reason, including malicious intent, we will immediately end today's meeting and send out another notice to reschedule this discussion in the next few weeks. We can't allow anonymous participants for security reasons, so please make sure your name is clear on the Zoom platform. And when you're called, say your name and affiliation. With that, I'll now pass it on to Ashley to provide the background information on what all of this means in defining safeguards, an overview of our proposal, and the next steps.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Ashley Giorgio, and I'm one of the lead staff implementing clean mobility equity projects. I equally wanted to say thank you for joining today's discussion. Our agenda includes background, staff's clean transportation equity proposal, questions and comments, and next steps. I will kick off our work group discussion by providing critical background to make sure that it's clear why we are meeting today and what we want to accomplish. The fiscal year 2021-2022 funding plan for clean transportation incentives, as Sam mentioned, was approved by the California Air Resources Board in November 2021. That includes $150 million in funding allocated to clean transportation equity projects. These projects encompass specific areas that are intended to help address unique community transportation needs, including clean vehicle ownership, clean mobility investments, Access Clean California and related outreach activities, as well as workforce training and development. The safeguards language in the funding plan supports Budget Act language and requirements. The determination of funding to be held back for projects based on these requirements is the purpose of today's work group discussion. Today's discussion will focus on the following clean transportation investments: financing assistance for low-income consumers, Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, Clean Mobility in Schools, Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, Access Clean California, and workforce training and development. The legislature specified in the budget language that a minimum of $75 million of the $150 million appropriation be allocated to Clean Cars for All. So that program is not part of the discussion today. $75 million is minimum, and there will not be more funding than that amount in the approved fiscal year 2021-2022 funding plan. The California Air Resources Board holds 4 quarterly cap and trade auctions in February, May, August, and November of each year. The fiscal year 2021-2022 budget relies on the 4 auctions that occur from August 2021 to May 2022. The Budget Act states that the California Air Resources Board cannot make more than 75% of any appropriation available prior to the 4th cap and trade auction in fiscal year 2021-2022, and that's to account for uncertainties in proceeds. CARB thus must hold back 25% of the $150 million allocated to clean transportation equity projects until final determination of May cap and trade auction proceeds. Total funds to be held back equals $37.5 million, just to be clear. So what that means is that $37.5 million in held back funds cannot be committed under grant or spent until the final determination of May cap and trade auction proceeds is made. Thus, the California Air Resources Board developed a proposal for implementing clean transportation equity investments in such a way that meets the Budget Act requirements and also allows essential funding for projects to be made available now. So with that, I'm going to scroll to the second page of our publicly available agenda and handout posted online, which provides the California Air Resources Board staff proposal. I will walk us all the way through this proposal, and then at that point in time, we will pause for questions and comments. So the order of information that I will provide in the table is as follows, just to make sure everyone can follow along. First, I'll provide an overview of each project and remind us of the focus and the goals of today's discussion. Then I'll cover approved funding allocated in fiscal year 2021-2022. That's in the far left column of the table. I'll provide the funding we propose be made available now, included in the right side of our table here. And lastly, I will cover funds we propose be held back for each project category. As a reminder, when we say funding to be made available now, That means that those project funds can enter into grant agreements and be spent immediately. If funds are held back, they cannot be included in funding agreements or spent until after that final determination of May auction proceeds is made. So first, let me briefly touch on Clean Cars for All. The Clean Cars for All program is a clean vehicle ownership project that provides incentives to help lower income consumers living in and near disadvantaged communities replace their older, high polluting vehicles with newer and cleaner transportation by reducing the purchase price. So you can see here a total of $75 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. As mentioned earlier, all $75 million is available now, and that's based on the specific legislative direction that was provided. Thus, no funding for Clean Cars for All is proposed to be held back. So now I will discuss financing assistance for lower income consumers. This project provides financial resources to help lower income Californians purchase advanced clean vehicles through vehicle price buydowns or grants, electric vehicle supply equipment grants, and fair pricing through lower interest rate loans at point of sale. A total of $23.5 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. Out of this amount, staff is proposing to provide $18 million available now that will be used for two specific things. Staff's in the process of adding $8 million to the current grant to support existing reservation lists from early 2021. Staff is also making up to $10 million of the approved allocation available through the solicitation for the administrator of a revamped program going forward, which we aim to finalize this spring. There was a public work group meeting held last week on January 20th to discuss the solicitation in further detail. The primary goal is to allow the program to have as much funding available upon reopening while continuing to support the pent-up demand the program generated last year. We propose holding back $5.5 million of the allocation to provide some assurance that there is sufficient funding to run the program after reopening. These funds would be added to the grant established after the solicitation. It's important to note that if the program is ready to relaunch prior to the solicitation process concluding, staff may use a portion of the $10 million to support a limited relaunch as well as a transition period. This would allow us to support consumers as soon as humanly possible. Staff will hold work groups related to the financing assistance for lower income consumers program modifications and timelines in the coming months. So now I will discuss clean mobility investments. Clean mobility investments are increasingly important to complement the vehicle replacement programs that I just mentioned by continuing to ensure funding is made available to increase access to clean transportation and mobility choices for communities. Programs such as car sharing, ride sharing, et cetera, can help reduce the need for vehicles and avoid the use of existing older vehicles. So this includes Clean Mobility Options, Clean Mobility in Schools pilot project, Agricultural Worker Van Pools pilot, and the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project. So first, Clean Mobility Options. Clean Mobility Options is a funding category intended to assess and address the barriers and transportation needs of our priority communities across the state and provide funding for mobility options which directly address those needs. The Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Project provides funding for clean shared transportation, including things such as zero-emission car share, van pools, electric and regular bicycle sharing, scooter share, and ride-hail services. As you can see in the table here, a total of $10 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. Staff proposed making $5.25 million of that allocation available now. The primary goal is to continue to signal that funds are currently available for the next project application window, which really is intended to encourage communities to apply. The Air Resources Board anticipates the second application window opening this spring with roughly $20 million in funds available in total. We propose holding back $4.75 million of the allocation based on the needs of this and the other equity projects. Based on the funds we propose holding back, the application window will be advertised at about $16 million. Our plan is to fund additional projects when and if the holdback funds become available. Now I will discuss clean mobility in schools. The Clean Mobility in Schools pilot project facilitates bold transformations in transportation and mobility opportunities in and around schools in disadvantaged communities. Grants provide funding for zero-emission vehicles, charging infrastructure, active and alternative transportation modes, and also aim to increase knowledge and acceptance of zero-emission mobility options for staff, for students, parents, and the surrounding communities. There are currently 3 projects that have been funded under the first solicitation, including El Monte Union High School District, the San Diego Unified School District, and Stockton Unified School District. El Monte and San Diego projects were both fully funded. As you can see in the table, a total of $10 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. This project is funding down the list for this fiscal year allocation. Staff propose making $3 million of the approved allocation available now. Stockton Unified School District was not fully funded in prior funding allocations and received about $5 million. The goal is to make the program whole and provide $3 million to fulfill the original ask of about $8 million. Staff plan to fund further down the list of competitive projects after the final determination of May 2022 cap and trade auction proceeds, and to fund Twin Rivers, which was the next highest scoring application. Thus, we propose holding back $7 million in funding for this project. Next, I will briefly discuss the agricultural worker van pools project. The Agricultural Worker Van Pool project is intended to provide affordable and reliable clean transportation and connections to job sites for agricultural workers in priority communities of the San Joaquin Valley and other areas in California. You can see in the table that there was no funding proposed for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. We paused funding to identify technologies that meet the unique specifications required for the project. No funding is currently available or held back for this project. Now I will discuss the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project. This project is a pilot that funds community-based solutions to address transportation inequities and facilitate socioeconomic benefits, which aims to address unique transportation needs, as well as increase access to key destinations such as grocery stores, workplaces, schools, daycares, and medical facilities, but also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A total of $25 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. Similar to what I mentioned for the Clean Mobility in Schools project that we just discussed, the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project will be funding down the list of competitive projects for the solicitation for fiscal year 2021-2022. Staff proposed making $9.25 million of the approved allocation available now to support the next 2 competitive projects, which are the Los Angeles Department of Transportation and San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency implementation grants. The Los Angeles Department of Transportation is a currently funded Sustainable Transportation Equity Project implementation grant from fiscal year 2019-20. $7 million was already allotted to this project, but there was over $13.8 million in funds requested. The primary goal is to fund the remaining $6.75 million that was requested in the initial competitive application to make the project whole. San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency was the next highest scoring implementation grant that was not funded with fiscal year 2019-2020 funds. Staff proposed $2.5 million in partial grant funding be made available now for this project, with the hope that additional funds would be made available after the May cap and trade auction proceeds determination. The total ask for the project is about $10.5 million, so the hope is that the remainder of the project could be funded after May 2022. So in summary, $6.75 million for Los Angeles Department of Transportation and $2.5 million for the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency is available now for a total of $9.25 million, as you see in the far right of the table. Staff also plans to fund the Oakland Department of Transportation Implementation Grant Project, assuming additional funding is available after the May cap and trade auction. Approximately $8 million in funding was requested for that project. Thus, we propose holding back $15.75 million in funding for the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency and Oakland Department of Transportation until after the final determination of May auction proceeds is made. So now I will discuss Access Clean California and related outreach efforts. Access Clean California is a multidimensional outreach project that streamlines access to and coordinates outreach for clean transportation and energy consumer-based equity projects. The pilot focuses on clean vehicle purchase incentive projects, including Clean Cars for All, financing assistance for lower income consumers, as well as clean vehicle assistance and rebate programs with the longer term vision of being a multi-agency platform. A total of $5 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. Staff proposed making $2 million of the approved allocation available now to support amending the current Access Clean California grant agreement with Grid Alternatives, and also related partner network and outreach activities. Thus, we propose holding back $3 million in funding for this project until after final determination of the May 2022 auction proceeds. Now I'll discuss workforce training and development. Workforce training and development maximizes economic opportunities and benefits for priority populations, including expanded and increased connections to good quality clean transportation jobs, training opportunities, and career development. Workforce development has been an important element of our clean transportation incentives and is included in many of our existing equity projects, including the Sustainable Transportation Equity Project I discussed with you earlier. A total of $1.5 million was approved for this project in fiscal year 2021-2022. Staff proposed that no funding be made available now, based on the anticipation of the timing of the agreements we plan to put into place to support adult and vocational school workforce development programs and expanded electric vehicle dealership training. This would not need to occur until after June 2022 and will likely involve interagency partnerships we already have in place with state partners. Thus, we propose holding back the full $1.5 million in funding for this project until after final determination of the May 2022 auction proceeds. So quickly, I wanted to direct your attention to the bottom of the table. You can see the totals: $150 million in approved allocations, $37.5 million in total funds held back, and $112.5 total funds available now for projects. Staff's main goal with this proposal was to find a balance, to the extent we could, in the amount of funds currently available to minimize disruptions wherever we could. But we also wanted to continue to pursue and prioritize our equity goals. We took into account the funding that needed to be in grant agreements now and critical signals we want to send to communities of funds being available to apply for projects. I also want to reiterate what held back means and the timing associated, so it's clear how we plan to move forward. When funds are held back from the approved allocation, they cannot be under grant or allocated to projects until final determination of the fourth cap and trade auction proceeds. The assumption we made with this proposal is that held back funds will not be made available for projects to enter into grant agreements until July 2022. Final determination of May cap and trade auction proceeds happens later in that month. Understanding what funds would become available from lower auction proceeds would take additional time, potentially up to a few months. Staff are thus working to prepare grant agreements in advance with the assumption that proceeds will be as expected to be able to move forward quickly, and also understanding that we can make adjustments to funding amounts as needed. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions and comments on staff's proposal. Since allocations for each project was approved already in November, as mentioned, we're specifically looking for feedback from all of you on the right-hand column of the table, as well as the safeguards portion. Really, it's the funding we propose to make available now and the funds we propose to hold back until final determination of proceeds. As a reminder, we will be using Zoom and the raise hand feature to facilitate this question and answer period. For those using Zoom online, please click raise hand in the option Zoom navigation bar participants tab. And for those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click raise hand in the more tab. For those who want to raise their hand who are participating by telephone, be sure to press #2 and we will call on you accordingly. So the plan here is to start with raised hands first, then we will address questions in the QA box that have not already been answered, switching off where needed between the two. Also, please keep in mind, we do need about 5 minutes at the end of the meeting to talk about next steps and close out this discussion. So Aria and team, we will end the question and answer period around 10:55. Final reminder, please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to speaking. It's definitely helpful for all of us involved. Thank you so much, and Aria, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm waiting for raised hands. I don't see any, so maybe go to the question that we have in the question and answer box.
Yeah, so is the revamping and refunding of financing assistance for low-income consumers in reference to the financing arm of CVAP? Lisa, did you want to address that question?
Sure. So we did, as Ashley laid out, we did receive additional funds. And one of the things that we had identified in the funding plan this past year that was adopted by the board in November is kind of a revamping of the program to move it to a needs-based program. And so we've had some work groups already for our solicitation, because we're also running a solicitation at the same time. And we plan to have a work group on what the needs-based will look like. Hopefully in the early March timeframe. We are still working on the calendar for this year's upcoming funding plan, and that'll kind of determine how these things fit in. But yes, we are working on revamping, and we will have funds going to that program soon. Again, as Ashley noted, some of the funds that were approved are working right now towards helping to fulfill the reservation list that was created when the program closed last year. We are using $8 million of the existing funds to get that into the grant and get those folks that have been waiting for a while served. So that's our first priority, and then second priority will be getting it back open.
Thank you, Lisa. It looks like a lot of the questions coming in are coming in through the Q&A box and not raised hands. So next up, we have Kathy Carriage's question. Are there workforce training programs in effect now?
So this is Ashley Giorgio. I can actually address this question. So I want to be clear that the $1.5 million in funding in the fiscal year 2021-2022 funding plan, that particular effort is an ongoing effort in partnership with our state partners like the Energy Commission and others. Those programs aren't in place now yet. We're working on a proposal for that, and hope to provide more information through a work group process this spring. But I do want to mention something while we have the time. We are working really closely with the Energy Commission on their Ideals of Workforce pilot project that provides up to $7 million in funding for zero emission training and workforce training and development. That is in progress, and an announcement will be made on projects for that probably within the next month. And Kathy, if you do have further questions at all related to workforce training and development, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself anytime.
Our next question in the Q&A box is from Sean Murphy. Is there a plan or timeline to reopen the Clean Mobility in Schools funds to new applicants for districts who missed the previous grant application?
I can take that one. It's a great question. It's not part of today's discussion, but I can provide some additional information, and Ashley will go into that again at the end of the meeting. So the governor's proposed budget did have funding for the clean mobility investments that include clean mobility in schools. It was a substantial amount of $419 million. The funding plan process that Lisa just mentioned and Ashley will go into in a little bit, it's going to start soon, is when we'll get into discussions on what we should do with that allocation and how we should split it up between the projects. Usually when we do a funding plan, it goes to our board in the fall, October, November timeframe. And then after that, if our board approves funding for this particular project, we will hold a new solicitation for grants or potentially do it through an administrator. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. So we're probably looking at mid 2023 when a solicitation would open up for funds. It could be earlier, but based on what we've done in the past, that usually takes us a few months after our board approves the package before we get a solicitation out. And there will be many work groups, both with regard to the governor's proposed budget and once the board approves the program of how to allocate those funds.
Thank you, Sam. It doesn't look like we have any more raised hands or any questions in the Q&A box.
So what I propose that we do then is we can talk a little bit more about the next steps that Sam just outlined, and then give folks a little bit more time to think if they have any additional questions. I think that sounds good. So again, thank you for your questions. These are all wonderful questions. We wanted to make sure we were providing background for folks who may not be as involved in our process. So appreciate that. So based on what we heard today, unless there's any start concerns, it sounds like we will be able to move forward with implementing the safeguards as proposed in the table here for fiscal year 2021-2022. We will continue our planning and be prepared to move forward as quickly as possible once the final determination of May auction proceeds is made, to utilize the approved funding allocated across projects and make sure they're getting into the communities as quickly as possible. So I'll provide some information on upcoming public meetings related to this year's, which is fiscal year 2022-2023 funding plan for clean transportation incentives. So first, on Thursday, February 10th, we will be holding a workshop to discuss the fiscal year 2022-2023 update to the 3-year plan for light duty vehicles and clean transportation investments. This meeting will be held from 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Further information is available on the California Air Resources Board's low carbon transportation investments and air quality improvement program meetings and workshop page. That includes the notice and the link to register to participate in the workshop. So that information is already available out there publicly. We also wanted to give you a heads up that the following week, we anticipate having a work group meeting to discuss clean mobility investments and the fiscal year 2022-2023 update to the 3-year plan for clean transportation investments. The date and time of this meeting are being solidified now, but we anticipate releasing a notice publicly with more information by next week. So please stay tuned there. What I would suggest, because there's so much that's going to be happening over the next few months, please make sure you're monitoring the low carbon transportation investments and AQIP meetings page that I just mentioned for more information on what's upcoming, and reach out to us as needed for more information. Let me pause just really quickly, Sam, before we go into some closing remarks just to see if there's any additional questions or comments at this time.
Yeah, that sounds good. Just one additional comment I have, there's a number of people on this work group that I don't recognize your names. That makes me excited because we're trying to get we're trying to reach out to everyone we possibly can who want to participate in this process. So I'm excited. I appreciate everyone's time today. It doesn't look like there's any other questions, so we can wrap this up early. If anyone has any questions on the funding plan, the process, please feel free to reach out to Ashley or I or Lisa or Aria. We've got a number of people where we can provide information and make sure that you guys are up to speed and get you guys involved. So with that, again, I appreciate your time, and we'll let you guys go a couple minutes early.
Last check, just to make sure no questions or comments before we conclude. Want to make sure we give people time. Aria, I'm not seeing anything. Do you see anything on your end? I just want to check real quick.
I am not.
Okay. Well, thank you all. As Sam said, really appreciate your participation. I know everyone's time is very valuable. We just wanted to make sure we were being transparent and sharing the path forward for these really important investments. Thank you. We look forward to engaging with you further going forward and wish you a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone.